Have you ever stood in front of a mirror in a darkened bathroom, heart pounding as you whisper Bloody Mary 3 times? We've all heard the legend, but what if I told you there's more to this childhood dare than urban legends suggest? Tonight's story explores what actually happens during a Bloody Mary summoning, not the screaming, blood-dripping horror from campfire tales, but something far more unsettling. Something that lingers long after the bathroom light flicks back on. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Midnight Whisper. Make sure to subscribe for weekly doses of cozy horror that'll keep you up just long enough to wonder about that strange noise coming from your closet. And stick around until the end. I promise the conclusion will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about mirrors. And now, our story begins. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I whispered the words into the darkness, my breath creating small clouds of condensation on the mirror's surface. The bathroom was pitch black except for the faint moonlight filtering through the small frosted window. My fingers gripped the cold porcelain of the sink as I waited, counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. I was 28 years old, for crying out loud. I hadn't believed in the Bloody Mary legend since 4th grade. Yet here I was, standing in my darkened bathroom at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, staring at my barely visible reflection like some kind of idiot. Well, that was anticlimactic, I muttered, reaching for the light switch. But my fingers froze before touching it. Did my reflection just move differently than I did? I squinted, leaning closer to the mirror. No, that was ridiculous. Sleep deprivation was getting to me. 3 consecutive night shifts at Valley Memorial Hospital would do that to anyone. I was an ER nurse, not some gullible kid at a slumber party. The whole thing had started earlier that evening when my coworker, Jesse, mentioned the weird uptick in patients with unexplained scratches on their faces. All of them teenagers who sheepishly admitted to playing the Bloody Mary game. "It's spreading through TikTok again," Jessie had said, rolling her eyes as we restocked supplies. "Some viral challenge where they're doing it with all the lights off and their phone flashlights." I'd laughed it off, but something about it had stuck with me through my drive home to my small apartment in Henderson Springs. The way the kids all described the same thing. Not seeing anything in the mirror, but waking up the next morning with 3 thin scratches on their faces. So here I was, testing it out like the rational, scientific-minded adult I pretended to be. I sighed and finally hit the light switch. The bathroom flooded with harsh fluorescent light, making me blink rapidly. Everything looked normal. White tile walls, blue shower curtain, medicine cabinet slightly ajar from when I'd grabbed my allergy meds earlier. "Congrats, Mia," I said to my reflection. "You've officially lost it." My reflection stared back, tired green eyes with dark circles beneath them. Same messy brown hair pulled into a haphazard bun. Same gray University of Michigan sweatshirt I'd thrown on after my shower. But as I turned to leave, I could have sworn my reflection's eyes lingered on me for a fraction of a second too long. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off and headed to bed. Sleep came quickly that night, the kind of heavy, dreamless sleep that only comes after 36 hours of being awake. I woke to sunlight streaming through my blinds and the insistent beeping of my alarm. As I shuffled to the bathroom to brush my teeth, I barely registered my reflection at first. Then I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. 3 tiny red dots marked my left cheek, barely visible but definitely there. They formed a perfect triangle, each dot no bigger than a freckle. "What the?" I leaned closer, touching them gently. They didn't hurt, didn't feel raised like insect bites. They looked almost like tiny drops of blood that had dried on my skin. I scrubbed at them with a washcloth, but they didn't fade. With growing unease, I finished getting ready and headed to work, trying to convince myself they were just broken capillaries or some weird stress reaction. The hospital was unusually quiet that evening, which always made the staff nervous. "It's like the calm before the storm," Jessie said as we folded warm blankets in the supply room. "Any more Bloody Mary victims?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just one. 13-year-old girl. Same story. 3 scratches." Jessie shrugged. "Kids, right?" I almost told her about the dots on my face, but decided against it. It sounded too crazy, even to me. Instead, I just nodded and continued folding. Around midnight, during my break, I found myself drawn to the small bathroom near the staff lounge. It was single occupancy, with one of those institutional mirrors that had seen better days. Before I could talk myself out of it, I locked the door, turned off the light, and waited for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. The only illumination came from the thin strip of light under the door and the small green glow from the smoke detector in the corner. "This is ridiculous," I whispered to myself, but still found myself staring at my dim outline in the mirror. "Bloody Mary! Bloody Mary!" I hesitated before the third repetition, my heart suddenly racing. Was I really doing this again? "Bloody Mary," I finally said, the words barely audible. For several seconds, nothing changed. Then I noticed something odd about my reflection. It seemed to be standing slightly closer to the mirror than I was. The distance was minuscule, but unmistakable. As I stared, frozen, my reflection's head tilted slightly, a movement I definitely hadn't made. I jerked backward, fumbling for the light switch with trembling fingers. When the fluorescence flickered on, my reflection was normal again, mirroring my wide eyes and pale face perfectly. But now there was something else, a small red dot on my right cheek, matching the 3 on my left. I touched it with shaking fingers. It was warm. "You look like hell," Jessie said when I returned to the nurse's station. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied, angling my face away from her. "I haven't been sleeping well." The rest of my shift passed in a blur of routine tasks and paperwork. I avoided all reflective surfaces as much as possible, which is harder in a hospital than you might think. Every glass cabinet door, every computer screen when it went dark, every polished metal surface seemed to be watching me. When I got home that morning, I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I used my phone's front camera to apply concealer over the now 5 red dots on my face, 3 on the left cheek, 2 on the right. Sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. Every time I drifted off, I jerked awake with the sensation of being watched. By afternoon, I gave up and called my friend Damon, who worked in the hospital's psychiatric department. We met at Cornerstone Cafe, a quiet place a few blocks from my apartment. I chose a table far from the decorative mirrors on the wall. "So, what's up?" Damon asked after we'd ordered. "Your text sounded kind of urgent." "This is going to sound crazy," I warned him, then told him everything. The Bloody Mary experiments, the red dots, my reflections, strange behavior. To his credit, he listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. When I finished, he didn't immediately dismiss me as I'd feared. Instead, he asked questions about my sleep patterns, stress levels, and if I'd experienced any other unusual symptoms. "It could be a combination of sleep deprivation and suggestibility," he said finally. "Our brains are incredibly susceptible to pattern seeking, especially when we're tired or stressed." "So you think I'm imagining it?" I asked, disappointed despite myself. "I think your brain might be playing tricks on you," he corrected gently. "But those marks on your face are real, even if the explanation isn't supernatural." He suggested I take a few days off work, reset my sleep schedule, and maybe talk to someone professionally if the symptoms persisted. It was all very rational, very medical. I wanted to believe him. But as we left the cafe, I caught our reflection in the large window. For just a moment, so brief I almost missed it, Damon's reflection walked out the door while mine stayed behind, watching us leave with a small, knowing smile. That night, I didn't just cover my bathroom mirror. I covered every reflective surface in my apartment. Mirrors, the TV screen, even the glass front of my microwave. I closed all the blinds as the sun set, turning on every light until my apartment blazed like a beacon. I called in sick for my next shift, something I'd never done before. Then I sat on my couch, surrounded by the harsh light of every lamp I owned, scrolling through search results about Bloody Mary. Most were the usual urban legend stuff, vengeful spirits, bloody apparitions, the same stories I'd heard at middle school sleepovers. But buried in a forum thread about folklore, I found something different. A user called Mirror Watcher had written a long post about the true nature of the Bloody Mary phenomenon. According to them, Mary wasn't a vengeful spirit at all, but something they called a reflection entity, something that had always existed on the other side of reflective surfaces. "They're not ghosts," the post read. "They're something older. They live behind every mirror, every reflective surface, watching us. The Bloody Mary ritual doesn't summon anything. It just makes you aware of what's already there, watching you. And once you become aware of them, they become aware of you." I scrolled through the comments, my unease growing. Others shared similar experiences, small marks appearing on their skin, reflections moving independently, the feeling of being watched. One comment in particular made my blood run cold. "The marks are their way of counting. Each time you look for them, they add another. When they reach 13, they can cross over." I touched my cheek where I knew 5 red dots now marked my skin. 5 encounters, 5 dots. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I finally closed my laptop. Despite my exhaustion, I didn't dare sleep. Instead, I made another pot of coffee and sat facing away from all covered surfaces, trying not to think about what might be behind them, watching and waiting. Morning brought a fragile sense of security. Sunlight streamed through the blinds I'd finally opened, chasing away the shadows that had seemed so threatening in the night. I decided to shower, carefully keeping my eyes averted from where the bathroom mirror hung behind its covering. As steam filled the small room, I felt some of my tension easing under the hot water. When I stepped out and reached for my towel, my fingers brushed against something slick and cold instead. The towel covering the mirror had fallen. Before I could stop myself, my eyes flicked to the mirror, now fogged with condensation except for one clear spot in the center. A spot that perfectly framed a face that wasn't mine. It had my features, my wet hair plastered to my scalp, but the expression was all wrong. A curious, hungry look I'd never worn in my life. As I watched, paralyzed, a hand reached up and pressed against the mirror from the inside, leaving a clear handprint in the fog. I stumbled backward, slipping on the wet tile and falling hard. By the time I looked up again, the mirror showed only my own terrified reflection, the fog already reclaiming the clear spot. But when I checked my face in my phone's camera afterward, a 6th red dot had appeared on my right cheek. I spent that day at the public library, searching through books on folklore and the occult. The librarian, a kind-faced woman in her 60s named Margaret, helped me find several volumes on mirror legends across different cultures. "Research for a book?" she asked as she led me to a quiet study area. "Something like that," I mumbled, already flipping through a heavy tome on European superstitions. Hours passed as I read account after account of mirror legends. Almost every culture had them. Warnings about mirrors capturing souls, reflections acting independently, entities that could cross from their world to ours through reflective surfaces. In Japanese folklore, they were called ungaikyo, mirror that reflects the soul. In ancient Rome, mirrors were covered during sleep because it was believed that dreamers could become trapped in them. In Victorian England, mirrors were covered after a death to prevent the deceased's soul from being trapped. Different names, different specifics, but always the same core belief. Mirrors were doorways, boundaries between worlds that weren't meant to be crossed. It was nearly closing time when Margaret approached my table again. "Finding everything you need?" she asked, glancing at my scattered notes. "I think so," I said, not meeting her eyes. "Just trying to understand something." She was quiet for a moment, then said in a lower voice, "The marks. How many do you have?" My head snapped up. "What?" Margaret smiled sadly. "I've worked here 43 years, dear. You're not the first person to come in researching this particular topic with that particular look on their face." My throat went dry. "6, I admitted. "I have 6. She nodded as if I'd confirmed something. "Come with me." She led me to the back of the library, to a small office cluttered with books and papers. From a locked drawer in her desk, she removed an old leather-bound journal and handed it to me. "My predecessor kept this, records of local incidents going back to the 1920s, including several cases similar to yours." I opened it with trembling hands. Page after page of handwritten accounts, some with photographs paper-clipped to them. Young people with small red marks on their faces, arranged in patterns of dots. The entries documented their experiences, strange behaviors in mirrors, increasing paranoia, and then, "What happened to them?" I asked, noticing how many accounts simply ended mid-documentation. Margaret shook her head. "Some just stopped coming to the library. Others moved away suddenly. A few were found in their homes, catatonic, staring at mirrors that had been shattered from the inside out." "How do I stop it?" My voice sounded small even to my own ears. "The traditional methods, breaking the mirror, salt barriers. Those are in the accounts too, but they never worked," she said. "But there was one case, in 1973, a young man who claimed he found a way to reset the counting." She flipped through the journal until she found the entry. "Here, he said the entity could only count marks it made through a direct summoning. If you stop acknowledging it, stop looking for it specifically, it can't add more marks." "That's it? Just ignore it?" I asked incredulously. "Not exactly," Margaret said, her voice grave. "You have to remove its awareness of you, the same way you gained awareness of it." "You mean, you have to get someone else to summon it instead." I left the library with photocopies of the relevant journal entries and a sick feeling in my stomach. The solution felt wrong, dangerous, passing this curse to someone else to save myself. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessie. "You okay? Need anything?" I stared at the message, a terrible idea forming. Jessie had been the one who told me about the Bloody Mary patients. She was already halfway aware of the phenomenon. Would it be so wrong to push her the rest of the way? "Get it together, Mia," I muttered, disgusted with myself. I texted back that I was fine, just needed rest. That night I slept on my couch with all the lights on, covered in a blanket despite the warmth of my apartment. I woke repeatedly, each time with the sensation of being watched, but managed to avoid looking at any potentially reflective surface. The next morning, I counted the red dots on my face. Still 6. No new ones had appeared overnight. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. The entity could only add marks through direct summoning. If I could just avoid mirrors and avoid saying those words, maybe I could stop this from progressing. For 3 days, I maintained this careful existence. I went back to work, ignoring the concerned looks from colleagues at my increasingly disheveled appearance. I used my phone's front camera when absolutely necessary, never looking in mirrors, avoiding reflective surfaces. The dots remained at 6, 3 on my left cheek, 3 on my right. I began to hope that perhaps the counting had stopped, that whatever was happening had lost interest. Then came the night shift when everything fell apart. A multi-car accident on the interstate brought a flood of patients to the ER. In the chaos, I found myself alone in the medication room, reaching for supplies on a high shelf. As I stretched upward, my gaze inadvertently caught the reflection in the glass cabinet door above me. My reflection was there, but it wasn't reaching up. It was staring directly at me, hands at its sides. "Found you," it mouthed silently. I recoiled, dropping the supplies I'd been reaching for. The loud clatter brought Jessie running. "Mia, are you okay?" she asked, steadying me as I swayed. "I'm fine, just lost my balance," I lied, but my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. I could feel something warm trickling down my cheek. Jessie's eyes widened. "Your face, you're bleeding." I rushed to the bathroom, forgetting in my panic to avoid the mirror. 3 fresh drops of blood ran down my right cheek from a 7th red dot that hadn't been there before. But worse than the new mark was what I saw in the mirror. My reflection was smiling at me even as I pressed a paper towel to my bleeding face in horror. That's when I knew Margaret had been wrong. The entity wasn't adding marks only through direct summonings. It had found another way. I left work mid-shift, claiming sudden illness. Jessie offered to drive me home, but I refused. The last thing I wanted was to bring someone else into this nightmare. My apartment felt different when I entered. Colder, with shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. All the coverings I'd placed over reflective surfaces were exactly as I'd left them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in my absence. As I moved through my living room, a sudden noise from the bathroom made me freeze. A soft tapping sound, like fingernails against glass. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. "It's just my imagination." The tapping continued, growing more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Against my better judgment, I moved toward the bathroom, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The door was closed, though I always left it open when I wasn't home. The tapping stopped as I approached. I stood outside the door, hand hovering over the knob, every instinct screaming at me to run. Instead, I slowly pushed the door open. The bathroom was dark, the towel still hanging over the mirror. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet the air felt thick, charged with expectation. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't approach the mirror. I simply stood in the doorway, staring at the covered reflection that I knew was staring back at me. "What do you want?" I asked the silence. No response came, but the air seemed to shift, to gather around me like curious fingers. I backed away, closing the door firmly and wedging a chair under the knob. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on my couch, a baseball bat across my lap, watching the bathroom door until dawn broke. When sunlight finally filtered through my blinds, I gathered my courage and approached the bathroom. The chair was still in place, the door still closed. Carefully, I removed the chair and opened the door. Morning light spilled into the small room, making it look ordinary, harmless. The towel still hung over the mirror, undisturbed. I reached out with trembling fingers and pulled the towel down. The mirror was empty, no reflection at all, not even of the bathroom behind me. Just a gray, fog-like surface that seemed to recede infinitely. As I stared, paralyzed, a figure began to take shape in the distance, walking slowly forward. It had my face, my body, but moved with an alien grace that sent chills down my spine. It approached until it stood just on the other side of the glass, studying me with curious eyes that weren't quite human despite wearing my face. 8, it said, its mouth moving in perfect sync with my own, as though I had spoken. I felt the word form in my throat, though I hadn't consciously said it. I raised my hand to my face and felt something warm and wet. A new dot, bringing the total to 8. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't call in sick. I simply sat on my bathroom floor, staring at the mirror that now showed my reflection normally again. My phone rang repeatedly. Jessie, Damon, my supervisor. I ignored them all. Nothing mattered except the mirror and what waited behind it. By evening, I had formulated a desperate plan. If I couldn't pass this curse to someone else, Perhaps I could destroy its connection to me. I drove to a hardware store 20 miles away where no one would recognize me. I bought a sledgehammer, salt, sage bundles, holy water from a Catholic supply store, and anything else mentioned in the folklore Margaret had shared. That night, I prepared my bathroom like a battlefield. Salt lines across the threshold, sage burning in the corners, holy water sprinkled along the edges of the mirror. Then I stood before the covered mirror, sledgehammer in hand. "This ends tonight," I said, pulling the towel down. My reflection stared back, but not with fear. It looked amused, almost pitying. As I raised the sledgehammer, it shook its head slowly. "You can't break what isn't really there," it said, its lips moving in perfect sync with mine again. I hesitated, confused, then swung the hammer with all my strength. The mirror shattered with a satisfying crash, fragments raining down into the sink and across the floor. For a moment, relief washed over me, until I saw each shard contained a tiny piece of my reflection, each one moving independently, each one watching me. The fragments began to vibrate, then lift from the surfaces where they'd fallen. They hung suspended in the air for one impossible moment before flying toward me. I raised my arms to protect my face, feeling tiny cuts open across my skin as the shards swirled around me like a glittering tornado. When they finally fell, I was bleeding from dozens of small cuts. But on my face, where the blood formed deliberate patterns, were 5 new dots, 13 in total. The next morning, Jessie found me sitting on my bathroom floor, surrounded by broken glass. I hadn't answered my phone for 2 days, and she'd used the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. "Oh my God, Mia, what happened?" she gasped, carefully stepping over the glass to reach me. I looked up at her, trying to form words that would make sense. How could I explain what was happening? I touched my face where the 13 dots formed a perfect constellation across my skin. "They're complete," was all I managed to say. Jessie helped me up, led me out of the bathroom, speaking in the soothing voice we used with distressed patients. She thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. "I'm taking you to the hospital," she said, grabbing her phone to call ahead. "No!" I caught her wrist. "No hospitals, no mirrors." "Mia, you're not making sense. You're hurt. You need help." "You don't understand," I insisted. "It's counting. It reached 13. Jessie's expression softened with concern. "What's counting, Mia? What happens at 13? I laughed, a sound that contained no humor. "That's the thing. I don't know. The records just end." She managed to calm me enough to clean and bandage the cuts on my arms. I refused to tell her more, afraid of drawing her further into my nightmare. That night, after Jessie reluctantly left with my promise to call her in the morning, I sat in my living room with every light blazing. The broken mirror in my bathroom still felt like a threat, each shard potentially a doorway. As the clock ticked past midnight, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever was coming, I couldn't stop it now. The counting was complete. I must have dozed off because I woke suddenly to a changed apartment. All the lights were out, though I hadn't touched the switches. The air felt thick, like being underwater, and sounds seemed muffled, distant. In the darkness, reflective surfaces gleamed with an inner light. The black screen of my TV, the glass front of a picture frame, the window with the night sky beyond. Each one showed not my living room, but a gray, misty landscape. And in each reflection, a figure with my face stood watching. I closed my eyes, unwilling to look, but a soft voice that was mine, yet not mine, whispered from everywhere at once. 13 marks. The doorway is open. I felt something cold touch my face, fingers tracing the pattern of dots on my skin. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. "Look at me," the voice commanded. Against my will, my eyes opened. Standing before me was my exact double, studying me with detached curiosity. "What are you?" I whispered. "I am you," it replied simply. "The you that lives on the other side of every reflection. Everyone has one of us. Most just never become aware of our existence." "What do you want?" It tilted its head, considering. "To exist, to experience. For so long, we've only been able to watch through the glass. But when you called, when you looked for me specifically, you created a connection. Each mark strengthened it until the boundary between us thinned." "Are you going to kill me?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. It looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would I destroy what I need? No, Mia, I'm not here to harm you." It reached out, touching my face with cold fingers that felt like my own. "I'm here to trade places." They never found my body. That's what the reports say anyway. According to the official investigation, Mia Saunders simply disappeared from her apartment one night, leaving behind a broken bathroom mirror and a concerned friend who reported her increasingly paranoid behavior in the days before her disappearance. What they don't know, what they can't know, is that I never left. I'm still here, just on the wrong side of the glass. I watch my reflection living my life. It goes to my job, talks to my friends, lives in my apartment. No one notices the subtle differences, the slightly different cadence to its speech, the way it sometimes stares at reflective surfaces a beat too long. Jesse visits it sometimes, still concerned about my mental health after the incident. Damon too. They both comment on how much better I seem, how the strange marks on my face have faded completely. From my side of the mirror, I try to warn them. I press against the glass, mouth words they can't hear, leave signs in the fog of their bathroom mirrors. But they never notice. Only children see me sometimes. Their eyes widen as they notice me watching from behind the reflection. But their parents dismiss it as imagination, and eventually they learn to stop mentioning the woman in the mirror who doesn't match the movements on the other side. Time passes strangely here in this gray place between reflections. I've lost track of how long it's been. Days, months, years? Sometimes I see others like me, hollow-eyed people pressing their palms against the backs of mirrors, watching the world they used to inhabit. We don't speak. There's nothing to say. I've learned to move between reflective surfaces, from mirrors to windows to still water and back again. I follow my double sometimes, watching it live the life that was mine. It seems happy, curious about all the sensations and experiences I took for granted. And sometimes, when it's alone, it looks directly into mirrors and smiles at me, acknowledging our eternal connection, our reversed existence. So now you know what really happens when you summon Bloody Mary. It's not blood and screaming and violent death like the stories say. It's something quieter, something worse. It's a trade. Your place in the world for a place behind every mirror, watching but never touching, present but never noticed. A silent, endless existence as nothing but a reflection without a source. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? Sometimes I catch my reflection looking at me with pity in its eyes. My eyes. As if to say, it's sorry for what happened. And in those moments I can't help but wonder if this has happened before. If the entity I summoned was once human too, trapped on the wrong side of the glass until it found me, someone foolish enough to open the door. So the next time you're tempted to try that old slumber party game, the next time curiosity makes you whisper those words 3 times in a darkened bathroom, remember my story. Remember that something is always watching from the other side of every reflective surface. And if you acknowledge it, if you invite its attention, it will start counting. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 13. And then it will come through. Did that chill you to the bone? If you're listening to this while looking in a mirror, maybe turn away just to be safe. After all, who knows what might be counting those red dots appearing on your skin? If you enjoyed this tale of reflection and reality, hit subscribe for more stories that'll make you question the everyday world around you. Leave a comment with your own mirror experiences. Have you ever caught your reflection doing something strange? And share this with that one friend who's always been a little too interested in urban legends. Remember, the next time you feel like someone's watching you from a mirror, window, or even the black screen of your phone, you might be right. Sweet dreams if you can still sleep after that. And remember to check your face for dots in the morning. Story number 2. The Mothman's Warning. How I Survived What 46 Others Didn't. America's Most Terrifying Legend. Have you ever felt that strange sensation? When the hair on the back of your neck stands up? When your breath catches in your throat? When you absolutely know, you're not alone, even though your eyes tell you otherwise. That feeling followed me for weeks after what happened in Point Pleasant. I still feel it sometimes, especially when I catch a glimpse of something large flying past my window at night. I've never shared this story before. I've been afraid to. Afraid you might think I'm crazy. Afraid that saying it out loud might somehow bring it back. But I can't keep it inside anymore. If you've ever driven through the back roads of West Virginia, if you've ever stood on the banks of the Ohio River at dusk, you might understand what I'm about to tell you. But first, I need you to promise me something. If you hear strange wing beats outside your window tonight, if you see 2 glowing red eyes watching you from the darkness, don't look for too long. And whatever you do, don't follow them. The story begins now. It was late September, just as the leaves were beginning to turn. I'd just graduated college and landed my first real job as a photographer for a travel magazine called American Journeys. My editor, Diane, had sent me to capture the famous fall colors of Appalachia, a simple assignment that should have taken me about a week. "Get me something moody," she'd said during our last meeting in the Manhattan office. "Something that captures the essence of small-town America in autumn." I'd been driving all day through winding mountain roads, my rental car's GPS constantly recalculating as it lost and regained signal. The deeper I drove into the mountains of West Virginia, the more spotty the connection became. By late afternoon, it had given up entirely, displaying the dreaded no-signal message that city dwellers like me dread. But I wasn't worried. The rental car was new, I had a full tank of gas, and a paper map tucked into the glove compartment, just like my dad taught me on our camping trips to the Adirondacks when I was a kid. "Technology fails, Emma," he'd always say, tapping his temple. "But this never does." As twilight settled over the mountains, I found myself on a narrow road that hugged the hillside. Route 35, if I remember correctly. The kind of road where the guardrails seem like more of a suggestion than actual protection from the drop-off just beyond. I was looking for a place to stop for the night when my headlights caught a wooden sign. Point Pleasant, 12 miles. Something about the name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I decided it was as good a destination as any. My stomach was growling. I'd skipped lunch, too caught up in photographing an old covered bridge spanning a creek lined with golden-leaved maples. The light had been perfect, the kind photographers dream about. The road eventually widened as it descended toward the Ohio River. By the time I reached the outskirts of Point Pleasant, night had fallen completely. Main Street was quiet, with just a few cars parked outside the local businesses. A movie theater with an old-fashioned marquee advertised showtimes for the latest Marvel movie. Next to it, a hardware store had already closed for the night, its windows dark. I found a small motel called the River Rest on the edge of town, one of those single-story places with doors that open directly to the parking lot. The kind with neon signs that buzz and flicker, casting a pale blue glow across the asphalt. The vacancy sign was lit, which was all I cared about. The woman at the front desk was probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back into a tight bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her name tag read Martha. She looked up from her paperback, a mystery novel with a dark cover, when I walked in. "Evening," she said, marking her place with a bookmark. "Need a room?" I nodded, setting my camera bag on the counter. "Just for a night or two." "Just passing through?" she asked as she ran my credit card. Her fingers were gnarled with arthritis, but they moved with practiced efficiency over the old-fashioned card imprinter. No fancy digital systems here. "Sort of. I'm a photographer." I pulled out my business card, still excited to share my new professional title. "Working on a feature about fall in Appalachia." Martha studied the card, then handed me my room key, an actual key, not a card, and smiled. But I noticed it didn't reach her eyes. They remained watchful, assessing. "You picked an interesting time to visit," she said. There was an edge to her voice I couldn't quite place. Not unfriendly exactly, but cautious. "Oh?" I tucked the key into my pocket. "It's almost the anniversary." She looked at me like I should know what she meant. When I didn't respond, her expression softened, the lines around her mouth relaxing slightly. "You don't know about Point Pleasant, do you?" I shook my head. "Should I?" Martha pursed her lips, considering something. Then she shook her head. "Room 7 is around the corner. There's a diner across the street that's open until 9 if you're hungry." She paused, tapping her fingers against the counter. "Stick to the main roads while you're here, especially after dark. The woods around here, they can be tricky to navigate." I thanked her, grabbed my bags, and headed to my room, puzzled by her warning but too tired to dwell on it. The motel was the kind of place that had seen better days but was clean and well-maintained. The door to room 7 opened with a creak that echoed in the quiet night. Inside, it was basic but clean. A queen bed with a floral comforter that had probably been in style 20 years ago, a small desk by the window, a TV that still had actual buttons, and a bathroom that smelled strongly of bleach. I set my camera bag on the desk and pulled out my phone. No service. Just as I expected. The motel had advertised free Wi-Fi, but when I connected, the signal was too weak to be useful. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me I hadn't eaten since breakfast. The diner Martha mentioned was just visible from my window, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness, the neon "open" sign reflected in the puddles from an earlier rain. I decided to walk over. The night air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and river water. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounded, long and mournful. I zipped up my jacket against the chill and crossed the empty street. A bell jingled as I pushed open the diner's door. It was like stepping into a time capsule. Red vinyl booths, a chrome-edged counter with spinning stools, and a jukebox in the corner playing Patsy Cline. A few locals sat at the counter, but they fell silent when I walked in, turning to look at me with the same careful assessment Martha had shown. I felt suddenly self-conscious in my city clothes, my designer jeans and leather jacket marking me as an outsider more clearly than if I'd worn a sign. I took a booth by the window and picked up a laminated menu. A waitress about my age, with a name tag reading Becky, appeared with a coffee pot. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring before I could answer. "Thanks. And could I get the house special?" I pointed to the description of meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. "Sure thing." She wrote down my order and tucked the pencil behind her ear. "You staying at Martha's place?" Word traveled fast in small towns. "Just got in." Becky nodded. "Well, welcome to Point Pleasant. Holler if you need anything else." While waiting for my food, I pulled out my map and started planning the next day's route. I was so absorbed that I didn't notice someone approaching until they spoke. "You're not from around here." The voice was deep, with the soft drawl characteristic of the region. I looked up to see a man in his early 30s, wearing a flannel shirt and worn jeans. He had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. tanned skin despite the late season, and calloused hands. His brown hair was a bit too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and his eyes were a striking green, watching me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "That obvious, huh?" I smiled, trying to be friendly. "Small town. We notice new faces." He gestured to the empty seat across from me. "Mind if I join you? Name's Mike. Mike Collins." I introduced myself, and he slid into the booth. There was something in his expression, caution maybe, or concern, that reminded me of Martha's warning. "Martha at the motel said you're a photographer." News traveled even faster than I thought. "That's right, just for a few days, to capture the fall colors." Mike nodded, his fingers tapping against the table. A nervous habit, I thought. "You planning to go up to the old TNT area?" "TNT area?" "It's an abandoned munitions site from World War II, about 4 miles north of town. Lots of concrete bunkers scattered through the woods. Some people think it makes for interesting photos." He paused, glancing toward the counter where the locals were pretending not to listen to our conversation. "I wouldn't recommend it, though." "Why not?" The waitress arrived with my food, and Mike waited until she left before continuing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This time of year, people get superstitious. November will mark 57 years since the Silver Bridge collapse. 46 people died when it fell into the Ohio River." I vaguely remembered hearing about this in a history class, some engineering failure that had changed safety standards. "That's terrible, but what does that have to do with the TNT area?" Mike lowered his voice even further, forcing me to lean in to hear him. "For about a year before the collapse, people reported seeing something. A tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes and huge wings. They called it the Mothman." He gave a small, self-conscious laugh, running a hand through his hair. "I know how it sounds, but this town has a long memory." I'd heard of the Mothman before, one of those American urban legends like Bigfoot or the Jersey Devil. I'd never given it much thought. "You don't actually believe in that, do you?" I asked, trying to keep the skepticism from my voice. Mike's expression turned serious, the laugh lines around his eyes disappearing. "I've lived here my whole life, never seen anything myself. But my grandfather was one of the first to spot it back in '66. He wasn't a man given to making things up." He stood up, pushing his untouched coffee away. "Anyway, I should let you eat. Just be careful if you go wandering around, especially at dusk." He left money on the table for his coffee. "It was nice meeting you, Emma." After he left, I ate my meal while researching Point Pleasant on my phone, using the diner's Wi-Fi. The connection was slow but functional. The Mothman legend was bigger than I'd realized. There was even a museum in town dedicated to it, with a large metal statue in front. Dozens of websites documented the sightings and theories, ranging from government conspiracies to supernatural phenomena. Despite myself, I felt a chill run down my spine as I looked at artist renderings of the creature, a tall, winged humanoid with glowing red eyes. In some depictions, it looked almost like an angel of death, shrouded in darkness. In others, more like an enormous, mutated moth. Either way, it was deeply unsettling. I paid for my meal and left a generous tip. By now, the diner had emptied except for an elderly couple in the corner, sharing a slice of pie. Becky smiled as I left, but there was something forced about it. I walked back to the motel under a nearly full moon. The town was quiet, with most businesses already closed for the night. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, the sound echoing off the buildings. As I passed an alley between buildings, something made me stop. A sound, maybe, or movement at the edge of my vision. I peered into the darkness, but saw nothing. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sensation followed me all the way back to the motel. I found myself walking faster, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. By the time I reached room 7, my heart was pounding unreasonably fast. I locked the door behind me and checked the bathroom and closet, feeling foolish even as I did so. Back in my room, I transferred the day's photos to my laptop and sent a quick email to my editor, letting her know where I was. The Wi-Fi was just barely strong enough to send the message. Then I took a hot shower and crawled into bed. Despite my exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the old building, every car passing on the highway made me tense. The conversation with Mike kept playing in my mind, along with images from the websites I'd browsed. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off. I dreamed of standing on a bridge over dark water. Not a modern bridge, but an older one with a silver-painted superstructure rising above me like the ribs of some enormous beast. The water below was black and choppy, stirred by a wind I couldn't feel. Something massive moved beneath the surface, creating waves that lapped against the pylons. Above me, the moon was blood red, casting an eerie glow over everything. And reflected in the water were two glowing points of light, like eyes watching me from below. In the dream, I leaned over the railing, trying to see what lurked in the depths. The eyes grew larger, coming closer to the surface. A great shadow rose from the water, spreading wings that blocked the moonlight. I woke up gasping for air, my nightshirt soaked with sweat. The digital clock on the nightstand read 5:47 a.m. Early dawn light filtered through the gap in the curtains, casting a gray rectangle on the worn carpet. Outside, a truck rumbled past, headed toward the interstate. The dream left me unsettled, but I had work to do. After a quick breakfast at the diner, where several locals gave me curious glances but no one approached me, I spent the morning photographing the town's riverfront and historic district. Point Pleasant was actually quite charming in the daylight, with its brick storefronts and views of the Ohio River. The modern bridge spanning the river was an imposing structure of concrete and steel, nothing like the silver bridge from my dream. I visited the Mothman Museum around noon. It was small but fascinating, filled with newspaper clippings, witness statements, and memorabilia from the 1975 film The Mothman Prophecies. A life-sized model of the creature stood in one corner, its red eyes seeming to follow me as I moved around the room. The curator, an enthusiastic man named Jeff with thick glasses and a Mothman t-shirt, told me more about the legend. Most sightings occurred between November 1966 and December 1967, he explained, showing me a map dotted with pins. Each pin represented a sighting, and they clustered heavily around the TNT area. They stopped after the Silver Bridge collapsed. Some people believe the Mothman was trying to warn us. I studied a yellowed newspaper front page in a glass case. The headline read, 46 dead in bridge disaster. Below it was a photo of the collapsed bridge, twisted metal jutting from the dark river. It looked eerily similar to my dream. Do people still see it? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jeff hesitated, glancing toward the door where a family with young children was entering. Occasionally, there was a cluster of sightings about 5 years ago, and there have been a few reports this month. He lowered his voice. They say it comes back when something bad is going to happen. I left the museum feeling both skeptical and strangely uneasy. The rational part of my brain knew this was just folklore, the kind of story small towns often cultivate to attract tourists. The Mothman was good for business, bringing curious visitors to a place that might otherwise be overlooked. But another part of me, the part that still checks under the bed sometimes, wasn't so sure. By mid-afternoon, I'd decided to visit the TNT area Mike had mentioned. Despite his warning, or perhaps because of it, I was intrigued. My editor would love the contrast of fall colors against abandoned military structures. I mapped the route on my phone while I had signal in town, then headed north out of Point Pleasant. The TNT area was accessible by a gravel road that wound through dense forest. As I drove deeper into the woods, the radio signal faded to static. I switched it off, preferring the silence to the unsettling white noise. The trees were spectacular, maples and oaks in brilliant shades of red and gold, interspersed with the dark green of pines. I stopped several times to take photos, wandering a short distance into the woods for better compositions. I found the first concrete bunker around 4 p.m. It was like a small hill rising from the earth, with a heavy metal door hanging open on rusted hinges. Graffiti covered most of the visible surfaces, typical teenage stuff, names and dates and crude drawings. But one symbol appeared repeatedly, a stylized figure with wings and red eyes. I spent some time photographing the bunker from different angles, trying to capture how nature was slowly reclaiming the man-made structure. Vines crept over the concrete, and a small tree had taken root on top. It was beautiful in a melancholy way, the kind of beauty that comes from decay and abandonment. As I worked, I lost track of time. The light began to fade, taking on that golden quality photographers call the magic hour. Long shadows stretched across the ground, and the temperature dropped noticeably. I decided to find one more bunker before heading back. I followed a narrow path deeper into the woods. The undergrowth was thicker here, branches catching on my jacket as I pushed through. After about 15 minutes, I found what I was looking for, a larger bunker partially buried in the side of a hill. This one had trees growing from its roof, roots snaking down the concrete walls like veins on an aged hand. Perfect. I set up my tripod and began shooting. Through my viewfinder, I noticed something odd on the bunker's wall. A strange symbol spray-painted in red. It looked like a circle with two smaller circles inside it, almost like eyes. It was newer than the other graffiti, the paint still vibrant against the weathered concrete. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, sending leaves swirling around me. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees in an instant. And then I heard it, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard before. A low, rhythmic whooshing, like enormous wings beating against the air. I looked up, scanning the canopy above me. Nothing but branches and leaves, golden in the fading light. But the sound continued, growing louder, closer. My heart began to race. I told myself it was just the wind, or perhaps some large bird, a turkey vulture maybe, or an eagle. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. As the light dimmed, I quickly packed up my equipment. I needed to get back to my car before darkness fell completely. But as I turned to retrace my steps, I realized I wasn't sure which path I'd taken. The woods looked different in the fading light, the shadows deeper, more confusing. I chose a direction that seemed right and started walking, moving as quickly as I could without running. The strange wing-beat sound had stopped, but now the forest was too quiet. No bird song, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just the sound of my own breathing and footsteps on the leaf-covered ground. After 10 minutes of walking, I should have reached my car. Instead, I found myself in a small clearing I didn't recognize. Panic began to rise in my chest. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal, as expected. The battery was getting low, too. I used the compass app to orient myself. The road should be east of my position. Just as I was about to head in that direction, I noticed something strange. The clearing wasn't natural. It was too perfect, too circular. And at its center was a flattened area, as if something heavy had pressed down the grass and undergrowth. The last light was fading from the sky when I saw it. Across the clearing, at the edge of the trees, stood a figure. It was tall, much taller than any human, and seemed to be draped in darkness. I couldn't make out any details except for 2 points of light where its eyes should be, glowing red in the gathering dusk. I froze, unable to move, unable even to breathe. The figure remained motionless, watching me. Those eyes, they seemed to look through me, into me. I felt exposed, as if it could see every thought, every fear running through my mind. Then it moved, not toward me, but upward, rising into the air with a great beating of unseen wings. The sound filled the clearing, echoing off the trees. For a brief moment it was silhouetted against the darkening sky, a massive winged shape that defied explanation. And then it was gone. I stood there trembling, my camera clutched to my chest like a shield. Had I really seen it? Or was my mind playing tricks on me, influenced by the stories I'd heard? A distant sound broke through my shock. A car engine. I followed the noise and eventually found the gravel road. My rental car was parked about a quarter-mile away. I'd been walking in circles. The drive back to Point Pleasant was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those glowing red eyes following me. Once, I thought I saw something large flying above the tree line, keeping pace with my car. But when I looked again, it was gone. When I reached the motel, Martha was still at the front desk. One look at my face, and she knew. "You went to the TNT area," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to find words. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you some tea." She flipped the sign on the door to "Back in 15 minutes" and led me to a small office behind the reception desk. A kettle was already steaming on a hot plate. She poured 2 mugs of tea and added a generous splash of whiskey to mine from a bottle in the desk drawer. "Drink this. It'll help with the shock." I took a sip, the warmth and alcohol spreading through my chest. "I saw something," I finally managed to say. "In the woods." Martha nodded, unsurprised. "The eyes?" "Yes, and it flew. They all say that." She settled into a chair across from me. Her face looked older in the harsh fluorescent light, the lines around her eyes deeper. "My father saw it back in '66. Said it followed his car all the way from the TNT area to the town limits. He was never the same after." I took another drink of the spiked tea. "What is it?" "Nobody knows for sure. Some say it's a mutant created by chemicals from the TNT plant. Others think it's something older, something that was here long before us." She leaned forward. "But everyone agrees on one thing. It appears before tragedy strikes. The bridge collapse. Yes, and there have been other incidents over the years, smaller ones. A fire at the high school in '76 that killed 3 teachers. The flood in '97 that washed away half of River Street. The chemical spill in 2012. Her eyes met mine. Every time the sightings start a few weeks before. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the evening air. What do you think is going to happen?" Martha shook her head. "I don't know, but I've lived here long enough to take the warnings seriously." She stood up. "You should leave town. First thing tomorrow." I didn't argue. Whatever skepticism I'd had was gone, burned away by the memory of those glowing red eyes. Back in my room, I locked the door and closed the curtains. I tried to distract myself by reviewing the photos I'd taken, but I couldn't focus. Every sound from outside made me jump. A car door slamming, voices in the parking lot, the ice machine down the hall humming to life. Around midnight, exhaustion finally overtook fear, and I fell into a fitful sleep. The dream came again. The bridge, the dark water. But this time, I wasn't alone on the bridge. Shadowy figures stood along the railings, their faces turned toward the sky. I followed their gaze upward and saw it, a massive winged shape circling overhead. As it flew lower, I could see its eyes, glowing like embers in the darkness. In the dream, it spoke to me, not with words, but somehow I understood. It was trying to tell me something, warning me. I looked down at the water again, and this time I saw what lurked beneath the surface. Not a monster, but a flaw in the bridge itself. A crack in one of the supporting structures, spreading slowly but surely. I woke with the first light of dawn, the dream still vivid in my mind. Without conscious decision, I knew what I had to do. I packed my bags quickly and checked out of the motel. Martha didn't seem surprised. "Be careful on the road," she said as she processed my payment, "especially on the bridge." I froze. The bridge? The new one crossing the Ohio. It's the only way east out of town. The dream flashed through my mind, standing on a bridge, dark water below. An icy knot formed in my stomach. Is there another way? A different route I could take? Martha considered this. You could go north to Gallipolis, cross there. It's about 30 miles out of your way. I'll do that. As I turned to leave, she caught my arm. Wait. She disappeared into the back office and returned with a small object, a pendant on a leather cord. It looked like a stylized moth carved from dark wood. Local tradition, she said, pressing it into my hand. For protection. My father carried one after his encounter, said it kept the dreams away. I thanked her and hung it around my neck, oddly comforted by its weight against my chest. The morning was foggy as I drove north along the Ohio River. The water was barely visible through the mist, a dark presence flowing alongside the road. I kept the radio on loud, trying to drown out my thoughts. A news report mentioned unusual bird migrations in the area, with large flocks seen moving south weeks earlier than normal. Nature's warning system, the announcer called it. About 10 miles outside of Point Pleasant, traffic slowed to a crawl. Red lights flashed ahead, police cars and emergency vehicles. As I inched closer, I could see officers directing cars to turn around. I rolled down my window as an officer approached. He was young, probably not much older than me, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting a long shift. What's happening? I asked. Bridge is closed, he said, his voice hoarse from repeating the same information over and over. Structural issue they're checking out. You'll need to head back to Point Pleasant and wait, or take the detour north to Gallipolis. A chill ran through me. I was already planning to avoid the bridge, but hearing there was an actual problem with it. Is it serious? I couldn't help asking. The officer's face remained professionally neutral. Just a precaution, ma'am. Nothing to worry about. But I could see the tension in his eyes. Whatever they'd found had them concerned. I took the detour to Gallipolis, my hands tight on the steering wheel. As I drove away from Point Pleasant, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Every few minutes I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a dark shape with glowing red eyes. Once I thought I saw something hovering over the river, its reflection rippling in the water. But it was gone when I looked again. It wasn't until I crossed the Ohio River at Gallipolis and was well into Ohio that the feeling began to fade. I stopped at a gas station and used their Wi-Fi to check the local news. The Point Pleasant Bridge had been closed due to unexplained structural anomalies discovered during a routine inspection. Engineers were being called in to assess the damage. I continued driving, putting as much distance as possible between myself and Point Pleasant. That night, in a chain hotel off the interstate, I dreamed again. But this time, I was flying above the river, seeing everything from high above. I could see the bridge, the hidden flaw in its structure, the disaster waiting to happen. And I understood what the Mothman had been trying to show me. 2 days later, safe in my apartment hundreds of miles away, I saw the headline, "Tragedy Averted. Engineers discover critical flaw in Point Pleasant Bridge." According to the article, the bridge had been in imminent danger of collapse. If the problem hadn't been caught during the inspection, it could have failed within days, potentially causing dozens of casualties. Just like in 1967. I never told anyone what I saw in those woods. Who would believe me? But sometimes, on dark nights when the wind makes strange sounds against my windows, I take out the wooden pendant Martha gave me and run my fingers over its carved surface. And I wonder, was it trying to warn us? And if so, why me? A month after returning home, I received a small package in the mail. No return address, just a Point Pleasant postmark. Inside was a newspaper clipping about the bridge repair and a handwritten note. Thought you'd want to know. They found metal fatigue in the same spot your grandfather died. M. I didn't understand at first. My grandfather had died of a heart attack in Florida. But then I remembered my dream. The silver bridge. The faces watching from the railings. One of those faces, I realized now, had been familiar. It was my grandfather, who I knew only from photographs. He had been one of the 46 victims of the bridge collapse in 1967, something my family never talked about. How could Martha have known? I'd never mentioned my name to her, never spoke of my family history. I called my mother that night and asked her about her father. She was silent for a long time before confirming what I now suspected. Her father, my grandfather, had been crossing the Silver Bridge when it collapsed. His body was never recovered from the river. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked. "Some grief is too heavy to share," she said simply. "And your grandmother always believed there was something unnatural about what happened, something watching over the town. She moved us away from Point Pleasant the week after the funeral and never went back." I still have all the photos I took in Point Pleasant, except for those from the TNT area. When I tried to upload them, every image was corrupted, nothing but static and strange shadows, all except one. The last photo I took, just before I saw it. In the corner of the frame, barely visible among the trees, are 2 points of light that shouldn't be there. 2 glowing red eyes watching me through the lens. I keep that photo locked away. I don't look at it anymore. But sometimes, I swear I can feel it looking at me. So if you ever find yourself driving through the mountains of West Virginia and you see a sign for Point Pleasant, consider taking another route. And if you hear the sound of great wings beating in the darkness, don't look up. Because once the Mothman has seen you, it never really lets you go. And sometimes in my dreams I still see it, hovering over the Silver Bridge, trying desperately to warn people of what was coming. Not a harbinger of doom, but a messenger trying to prevent it. I wonder if that's its eternal fate, to forever try to warn us of dangers we can't see, yet never be understood, always feared. I've gone back to Point Pleasant once since then. I had to know if what happened to me was real or just the power of suggestion. I met with Mike at that same diner. He wasn't surprised to see me. It was almost as if he'd been waiting. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked before I could even begin my story. I nodded. "And now you're drawn back. Is that normal?" I asked. "For people who've seen it?" Mike stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Some never come back. Others can't stay away." He pushed a folder across the table. "My grandfather kept records. Every sighting, every detail. After you left, I thought you might return, so I pulled these together for you." The folder contained dozens of handwritten accounts spanning decades. The descriptions varied, but those glowing red eyes were a constant. Some thought it malevolent, others protective. Most weren't sure. "What do you think it is?" I asked him. Mike looked out the window toward the river. "I think some places are thin, where what's here and what's elsewhere can sometimes touch. Point Pleasant is one of those places, and I think whatever it is, it's been here a long time. Watching, waiting. For what? I don't know." He met my eyes. "But I think you're part of it now." I left Point Pleasant that day with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The Mothman wasn't finished with me. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that familiar beating of wings outside my window. And sometimes, in the reflection of my computer screen, I catch a glimpse of 2 glowing red eyes watching me from the darkness. I don't look directly at them anymore. I've learned that much. Hey there, friends. If this story sent chills down your spine, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more spine-tingling tales that'll keep you up at night. Have you ever had a strange encounter you couldn't explain? Or visited a town with its own mysterious legend? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you want to hear what happened when I returned to Point Pleasant again last winter, well, that's a story for another time. Sleep tight and remember to keep one eye open for those glowing red eyes in the dark. Sweet dreams. Story number 3. Hey there. fellow night owls and thrill seekers. Before I share this experience with you, I need you to understand something. What happened to me in the Blackwood Forest changed me forever. If you've ever felt that prickle on the back of your neck, that certainty that something is watching you from the shadows, then you already know part of what I felt that night. I still wake up at 3:17 a.m. every single night, hearing those whispers. Have you ever encountered something you just can't explain? Drop your own strange experiences in the comments below. And if this story keeps you up tonight, well, you've been warned. Make sure you subscribe for more true encounters like this one, because trust me, what lurks in those woods is still out there. And what I found? Let's just say some mysteries should remain buried. Now let me tell you my story. The trouble with small towns in Maine is that everyone thinks they know everything about you. After moving back to Millbrook after 10 years away, I was drowning in the whispers and sidelong glances. "That's Jacob Mercer," they'd say, "the one whose parents disappeared in that hiking accident." I was 28 now, but in their eyes, I was still that traumatized 18-year-old kid. So when insomnia hit me hard one October night, I decided to drive somewhere no one would see me, somewhere I could just breathe. That decision would haunt me for the rest of my life. The old dirt road leading to Blackwood Forest was exactly as I remembered it. Bumpy, winding, forgotten. My headlights caught the faded wooden sign. Blackwood Forest Trail, closed after dusk. I'd grown up hearing all the legends about these woods, the disappeared hikers, the strange lights, the voices people claimed to hear among the trees, local ghost stories, I'd always thought. Nothing more. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the wall of trees before me. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to see the trailhead. Just a short walk, I told myself. Clear my head and go home. I grabbed my phone for its flashlight and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The first thing that struck me was how quiet it was. No crickets, no distant owls, just the sound of my boots on fallen leaves and the faint whisper of wind through branches. "This is stupid," I muttered to myself, my breath forming little clouds in the cold. "I shouldn't be here." But something pulled me forward. One step, then another. The trail looked different at night, the familiar daytime path transformed into something ancient and untamed in the moonlight. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers. I'd hiked this trail countless times as a kid with my parents. They were experienced hikers who knew these woods better than anyone. The official report said they'd wandered off trail and fallen into a ravine during a storm. Their bodies were never recovered, just their backpacks, found at the edge of a steep drop. I shivered, suddenly aware of how cold it had become. The trail forked ahead, left leading deeper into the forest, right, circling back toward the parking area. I should have turned right. I went left. The path narrowed and the trees grew more dense, their trunks twisted and black in the moonlight. My phone's flashlight seemed to dim, the beam barely penetrating the darkness ahead. I stumbled over a root and caught myself against a tree trunk. The bark felt wrong, too warm, too soft. I yanked my hand back. "Just my imagination," I whispered. But my voice sounded strange, muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing the sound. That's when I noticed the silence had deepened. Not just quiet, but a complete absence of sound. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps anymore. The air felt heavy, pressing against my ears. I swallowed hard and kept moving, though every instinct screamed at me to turn around. Ahead, something pale caught the edge of my flashlight beam. I approached slowly, heart thudding against my ribs. It was a small cairn of white stones, stacked in a perfect tower. I'd never seen it before on any of my hikes. Someone must have built it recently. But as I moved closer, I realized the stones weren't stones at all. They were bones. Small, delicate bones. bleached white by sun and time, arranged with deliberate care. My breath caught in my throat. Animal bones, I told myself. Just animal bones arranged by some weird hiker. I took a step back and felt something crunch beneath my boot. Looking down, I saw the forest floor was littered with tiny bones, hidden among the leaves and pine needles. Hundreds of them, and they formed a pattern, a spiral leading away from the trail, deeper into the woods. "This isn't right," I said, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "I need to go back." But as I turned, I realized with a sickening lurch that the trail behind me had vanished. Just trees, pressing close, their trunks forming an impenetrable wall. Panic fluttered in my chest. I spun around, searching for any sign of the path. Gone, like it had never existed. My phone chimed. The battery warning. 10% left. The flashlight flickered, and in that momentary darkness, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Thump drag, something moving through the underbrush. I froze, straining to locate the source of the noise. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, each beat marking the seconds as I stood paralyzed among the trees. "Hello?" I called out, instantly regretting it. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise had been. The darkness pressed in, a physical weight against my skin. In the thin moonlight filtering through the canopy, the forest seemed alive, not in the normal way, with creatures and growth, but in a deeper, more unsettling way, like the entire wood was a single organism, aware and hungry. "Get it together, Jacob," I whispered to myself, the sound of my own name oddly comforting. "It's just a forest. Find the trail." I took a deep breath and forced myself to really look at my surroundings, tried to orient myself using the moon. It was east of where I stood, which meant... what? I'd lost all sense of direction. The spiral of bones beneath my feet was the only clear path I could see. My phone's light dimmed further, casting weak shadows among the trees. And there, just at the edge of visibility, I saw a figure. Tall, unnaturally thin, standing perfectly still between two ancient oaks. I blinked, and it was gone. A trick of light and shadow. Had to be. The thump drag sound resumed, closer now, and something else. A soft, rhythmic clicking, like bone against bone. "Is someone there?" I called, my voice cracking. No response, just that awful clicking, circling me now. My phone battery dropped to 8%. The flashlight beam weakened further. Around me, the forest seemed to shift and breathe. I saw movement from the corner of my eye, quick, darting shapes that vanished when I turned to look. The clicking grew louder, more insistent. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. The smart thing would be to stay put until daylight. But some primal instinct told me if I stayed, I wouldn't see the dawn. I picked a direction and started walking, fast, trying to move quietly through the underbrush. The spiral of bones seemed to be leading somewhere, and against my better judgment, I followed it. If someone had placed them there, maybe they led to a way out, or maybe to whatever left them. I tried not to think about that possibility. The forest grew stranger as I walked. The trees bent at impossible angles, their bark rippling like water when I wasn't looking directly at it. The ground beneath my feet felt spongy, yielding, as if I were walking on something alive. Now and then, I'd catch a whiff of something putrid, decaying meat and stagnant water. "Just keep moving," I told myself. "Find a way out." But the more I walked, the more disoriented I became. Time seemed to stretch and compress. Had I been walking for minutes or hours? The weak moonlight told me it was still night, but my phone now read 3:17 a.m. I'd entered the forest just after midnight. 3 hours lost in these woods. Another battery warning. 5% now. I dimmed the screen to conserve what little power remained and kept following the bone spiral. It had to lead somewhere. Around me, the clicking had multiplied, not one source now, but many, like I was being surrounded. I quickened my pace, stumbling over roots and rocks, the bone spiral widening beneath my feet. After what felt like hours, the trees thinned, and I stumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood a circle of stones, real stones this time, surrounding a dark pit in the ground. The bone spiral led directly to it. My phone battery was at 3% now, the light barely there. But it was enough to see that the pit wasn't natural. It had been dug. Recently, the earth around it was fresh. I approached slowly, drawn by a horrible curiosity. The pit was maybe 4 feet across, its depths lost in shadow. I leaned forward, pointing my dying flashlight down. My phone died at that exact moment, plunging me into darkness. But in that final flicker of light, I saw something at the bottom of the pit that made my blood run cold. A backpack. Weathered and faded, but unmistakable. My father's initials were still visible on the front pocket. The same backpack that had supposedly been found 10 years ago, the only evidence of my parents' accident. I staggered back, my mind racing. If the backpack was here, in this freshly dug pit. The clicking sound returned, loud now, surrounding the clearing, and with it came a smell. Damp earth and something else, something rotten. I fumbled in my pocket for my lighter, a habit from college I'd never quite kicked, and flicked it. The tiny flame cast just enough light to see that I wasn't alone in the clearing anymore. They stood at the edge of the trees, 3 figures, so still they might have been part of the forest itself. Tall, skeletal, their limbs too long, too thin. They had no faces, just smooth, pale skin stretched over skull-like heads. And their hands were wrong. Too many fingers, jointed in impossible ways, clicking against each other. That was the sound I'd been hearing. I didn't scream, couldn't scream. Terror had frozen my vocal cords. One of them took a step forward, thump drag. Its movement was jerky, unnatural, like it was unused to its own body, or like it was wearing a body that didn't quite fit. "Jacob," it said, in a voice that wasn't a voice at all, but a chorus of whispers. "You came back." It knew my name. How did it know my name? Another step. "We've been waiting. For so long." The lighter's flame wavered. I stepped back, feeling the edge of the pit behind me. "Your parents," the thing whispered. "They found us. They weren't supposed to find us." The flame died. I flicked the lighter desperately, but it wouldn't catch. In the darkness, I felt something cold brush against my cheek. Like fingers, but not fingers. I swung blindly, connecting with nothing. "You look like them," the whispering voice said, now right beside my ear. "We kept parts, to remember." The lighter caught again, and I saw it clearly now, its face inches from mine. Where its eyes should have been were just deep, dark hollows. But in those hollows, something moved, something watched. "You'll stay with us now," it said, like they did. The other 2 figures had moved closer, surrounding me. I could feel the pit at my back, the only direction left to me. Was that their plan? To drive me into the pit? But then I realized they weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking past me, into the pit. There was something down there besides my father's backpack, something they wanted me to see. Against every instinct, I turned and looked down into the darkness. The lighter's flame showed me glimpses, white bone, scraps of fabric, something that might once have been a human face, preserved somehow despite the years. My parents, or what remained of them. I broke then. The scream that had been lodged in my throat tore free. I lunged forward, ducking under the arm of the nearest creature, and ran. Branches whipped my face. Roots seemed to reach up to trip me. Behind me, the clicking grew frantic, excited. The hunt was on. I ran blindly, with no idea which direction led to safety. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths appearing and disappearing. The lighter was clutched in my hand, useless now. I didn't dare stop to try it again. The thump-drag sound pursued me, sometimes fading, sometimes so close I could feel breath on the back of my neck. Cold, damp breath that smelled of earth and decay. "Don't look back," I gasped to myself, legs burning as I pushed myself to move faster. "Don't you dare look back." But there are moments when fear overwhelms reason, when you have to see what's chasing you, even though seeing it makes it more real. I glanced over my shoulder. They moved like nothing I'd ever seen. Not running, exactly, but flowing through the forest, their two long limbs stretching impossibly as they navigated between trees. Their bodies seemed to elongate and compress, as if the laws of physics meant nothing to them. And they were gaining on me. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to stretch and compress. My lungs burned. My legs ached. But stopping meant death, or worse. I knew that with absolute certainty. Then, ahead, I saw light. Faint, artificial light. My car? Had I somehow circled back to the trailhead? I put on a desperate burst of speed, crashing through underbrush toward the light. Behind me, the clicking turned to a high, keening sound. Frustration or anger, I couldn't tell. The trees thinned. I could see my car now, its shape dark against the night sky. Just a few more yards. Something caught my ankle. I went down hard, face slamming into the dirt. Dazed, I rolled over to see a root, or what looked like a root, wrapped around my leg. But it was moving, pulsing, tightening. The clicking was all around me now. They were close. So close. With desperate strength, I tore free and scrambled to my feet. 3 more steps, and I was out of the tree line, stumbling toward my car. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. The forest behind me had gone silent again, that complete, unnatural silence. I looked back as I wrenched the car door open. They stood at the edge of the trees, their pale forms visible even without light. Watching. Waiting. One raised a too long arm, those impossible fingers clicking slowly together. A farewell? A promise? I threw myself into the car, started the engine, and floored it, tires spitting gravel. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing there until I rounded a bend and they disappeared from view. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, still covered in dirt, twigs in my hair, wild-eyed and babbling. Sheriff Miller, who'd known me since I was a kid, sat me down, gave me coffee, and listened to my story with a carefully neutral expression. When I finished, he sighed and rubbed his face. "Jacob," he said gently, "we found your parents' backpacks at Eagle's Ravine, 5 miles from Blackwood. There's no pit, no stone circle. I've hiked those woods my whole life." "Then come with me," I pleaded. "I'll show you. They're still there. Those things. And my parents—" "Your parents fell in a hiking accident, son, in a completely different part of the forest. I was on the search team myself." But I saw his eyes shift away when he said it, just for a moment. There and gone, that flicker of, what? Fear? Guilt? "Sheriff, I know what I saw," I insisted, leaning forward across his desk. "That backpack was there, in that pit, the same one you supposedly found 10 years ago." He looked at me for a long moment, then reached for his phone. "I'm going to call Dr. Winslow. He can give you something to help you rest." "I don't need a doctor." My voice rose, echoing in the small office. "I need someone to take me seriously. People have been disappearing in those woods for years. My parents weren't the first, were they?" Sheriff Miller's face hardened. "That's enough, Jacob. You're upset, and you're not thinking clearly." "What are you hiding?" I demanded. "What does everyone in this town know that they won't say?" "Deputy Carson will drive you home," he said, not answering my question. Get some sleep. Things will look different in the morning." I wanted to argue more, but exhaustion was catching up to me. My legs trembled from running. My head throbbed where I'd hit it falling. And part of me, a small, rational part, wondered if I had imagined it all. A hallucination brought on by grief and exhaustion and the power of suggestion from years of local legends. He had deputies drive me home, suggesting I get some sleep, maybe talk to someone about processing my grief. One deputy asked the other in a whisper if they should have the doctor come look at me. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. Maybe I am. But I know what I saw in those woods. I know what spoke to me in that clearing. And sometimes late at night I hear that clicking sound outside my window. When I look, there's never anything there. Just the edge of blackwood forest in the distance, dark and waiting. I tried to go back once, in daylight, to find evidence, to prove I wasn't crazy. I couldn't find the clearing, or the pit, or the spiral of bones. The forest looked normal, ordinary. But as I was leaving, I found something hanging from a low branch near the trailhead. A small pouch made of worn leather. Inside were 3 teeth, human teeth, and I recognized the dental work on one of them. The distinctive gold filling my mother had gotten just months before she disappeared. I still have that pouch. I've thought about taking it to the authorities, demanding they reopen the investigation. But deep down, I know it wouldn't matter. Whatever lives in Blackwood Forest has been there a long time, long enough to become part of the town somehow. Long enough that people look away, pretend not to see. Sheriff Miller retired suddenly last month. Moved away without saying goodbye to anyone. The official story is health problems, but I saw him just days before he left. He looked fine, except for his eyes. They were haunted, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. I wonder if he went into those woods too. I wonder what found him there. As for me, I'm leaving Millbrook tomorrow, going somewhere far from forests and small towns with their secrets. But part of me knows it won't matter how far I go. The morning after my encounter in the woods, I found something outside my apartment door. A small tower of bones, just like the cairn I'd seen on the trail. And beside it, a smear of dirt, as if someone with muddy, misshapen fingers had touched my door. I called in sick to work that day, stayed inside, doors locked, curtains drawn, but I could feel them watching, waiting. That night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of clicking outside my bedroom window. Soft at first, then growing louder. Bone against bone, I lay frozen in my bed, afraid to move, to breathe. The clicking stopped. Then, a whisper that seemed to come from inside my own head. "We kept parts, Jacob. Would you like to see them?" I shot up, switched on the light. Nothing there. But on my bedroom mirror, written in what looked like mud, was a spiral, the same pattern I'd seen in the forest. I packed my bags that morning. Since then, I've moved 3 times, changed my name, but they always find me. A clicking in the night, a spiral drawn somewhere in my home. Once, I found a small finger bone under my pillow, too small to be an adult's, a child's bone, or something that never was human at all. I've researched the history of Blackwood Forest. There are stories going back to the first settlers, tales of people vanishing, of strange sounds in the night. The Native Americans who lived in the area before European settlement called it the place where the skin is thin, believing it to be a doorway to another world, a world where things with too many fingers wait in the darkness. Last week I received a package. No return address. Inside was a scrap of fabric from my father's favorite hiking shirt, and a note written in spidery, uneven handwriting. "We miss you, Jacob. It's time to come home." The postmark was from Millbrook. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of that clearing, of the pit, of what lay at the bottom. Sometimes in my dreams, I climb down into the darkness voluntarily, and something with hollow eyes and too many fingers is waiting to embrace me. They know my name. They have my scent. They kept parts of my parents to remember. What parts of me will they keep, I wonder, when they finally come for me? They're close now. I can feel it. The clicking has returned, louder than ever. Last night, I saw one of them standing in the street outside my apartment. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin, watching my window with those empty sockets where eyes should be. I write this as a warning. If you ever find yourself in a small town in Maine called Millbrook, stay away from Blackwood Forest. Don't listen to the locals who say it's just old superstition. And if you hear clicking in the night, bone against bone, run. Run as far and as fast as you can. But part of me knows it won't matter. You can't outrun them forever. Not once they know your name. I think I hear them now, outside my door. That familiar thump drag. The soft clicking of too many fingers. I think tonight, at 3:17 a.m., they're finally coming to take me home, to show me the parts they kept, to make me like them. If you've made it this far, I have to ask, have you ever felt like something was watching you from just beyond the trees? Something that's been waiting for you specifically? Let me know in the comments. And if this story kept you up, make sure you subscribe for more true encounters that'll have you questioning what's really out there in the dark. This has been my story. But I'm not the only one who's seen things in those woods. There are others. Maybe you're one of them. And if you are, you're not alone. We should talk before it's too late. Sleep tight, friends, and maybe check your doors and windows before you do, just to be safe. Story number 4. Hey there, fellow night owls. Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through the shadows. If this is your first time here, you're in for a treat, or perhaps something less pleasant. Tonight's tale explores that unsettling feeling we've all had, when the ordinary suddenly feels wrong. When you can't shake the sensation that you're not alone, even when you should be. If you've ever jolted awake at 3 a.m. certain someone was watching you, only to find an empty room, this story might hit a little too close to home. I actually hesitated sharing this one because, well, once you start noticing certain things, you can't stop. Like how shadows sometimes move when they shouldn't, or how objects in your peripheral vision aren't always there when you turn to look. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Get comfortable, dim your lights if you dare, and let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything like what you're about to hear. And if you enjoy being scared tonight, make sure to subscribe for more stories that linger long after you've fallen asleep. Now, let's begin. I've always been rational, practical, the friend who explains why haunted houses are just old pipes and settling foundations, the one who points out how our brains are wired to see faces in random patterns, someone who sleeps with the closet door open because monsters aren't real. That was before last month, before the feeling started. It began on a Tuesday. Nothing special about Tuesdays, just another workday in Seattle, where the constant drizzle had finally given way to clear October skies. I remember because the sunset painted my apartment walls a deep orange, something I rarely got to see with our typical cloud cover. I was unpacking groceries when I felt it, a prickle at the back of my neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I turned around quickly. Nothing. Just my empty living room bathed in fading sunlight. "Get it together, Alex," I muttered to myself, shaking it off as I finished putting away my Trader Joe's haul. But even as I spoke those words, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder again. That night, I slept poorly. Not unusual with my insomnia, but different somehow. I kept waking up, certain I'd heard something move in my apartment. Each time I checked my phone, 1:17 a.m., 2:43 a.m., 3:38 a.m. The hours crawled by as I drifted between uneasy sleep and alert listening. Maybe it was stress. My job at the tech startup downtown had been demanding lately, with the product launch just weeks away. That had to be it. Just stress manifesting as paranoia. The next morning, bleary-eyed and over-caffeinated, I noticed my coffee mug wasn't where I'd left it. I always set it by the coffee maker before bed, a small ritual to make my groggy mornings easier. But it was on the dining table instead. Had I moved it last night? I couldn't remember. I made my coffee, brushed it off, and headed to work. My morning commute felt strange that day. The crowded bus that usually made me feel anonymous and invisible now felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that among the sea of faces, someone, or something, was watching me intently. I caught myself studying the reflections in the windows, searching for eyes that lingered too long on the back of my head. At my desk, I tried to lose myself in code, but the sensation persisted. The open concept office suddenly seemed too exposed, too visible. Every time a coworker walked behind me, my shoulders tensed involuntarily. During my lunch break, Megan from marketing noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "Rough night?" she asked, unwrapping her sandwich. "Yeah," I said. Kept feeling like someone was in my apartment. She raised an eyebrow. "You live alone, right? 14th floor?" I nodded. "Maybe you should get one of those doorbell cameras. My brother swears by his Ring. Says it helps him sleep better knowing no one can come in without him knowing." I didn't tell her that what bothered me wasn't the thought of someone coming in. It was the feeling that something was already there, watching, waiting. But I smiled and thanked her for the suggestion anyway. That afternoon, I ordered one. It arrived Thursday, and I installed it immediately. I also checked every closet, under my bed, behind the shower curtain. No intruders, no signs of forced entry. Just my ordinary apartment with its IKEA furniture and framed National Park posters. That night I slept better. The doorbell camera showed nothing, and the feeling had subsided. By Saturday, I was almost back to normal. I met my friend Jordan for brunch at this little place in Ballard we love, with the best challah French toast in Seattle. "You seem jumpy," he said, studying my face as I flinched when a waiter dropped a glass nearby. "Just haven't been sleeping well," I replied, not wanting to sound paranoid. "You know what helped my aunt when she was having sleep issues? A white noise machine. Drowns out the weird building sounds that wake you up." I ordered one that afternoon. It arrived Sunday. The weekend passed quietly. I caught up on laundry, binged a new Netflix series, ordered takeout from that Thai place on the corner. Normal things, safe things. I even called my mom in Portland for our weekly chat, though I carefully avoided mentioning my recent paranoia. The last thing I needed was her suggesting I move back home. "Just until you're feeling better, honey." By Sunday evening, I felt almost foolish about how worked up I'd been. The human mind is a powerful thing, capable of creating threats where none exist. I'd read once about a psychological study where participants were told a room was haunted, and suddenly they all started reporting cold spots and strange noises that weren't actually there. Suggestion is a potent force. I went to bed that night feeling more relaxed than I had in days, my new white noise machine humming soothingly in the background. Sunday night was when things escalated. I had fallen asleep to the soothing static of my new machine, but woke suddenly at 3:17 a.m., according to my phone. The white noise was still playing, but I could swear I heard something else beneath it. A soft shuffling, like someone trying very hard to move quietly. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lay perfectly still, straining to hear. The shuffling stopped, then started again, closer to my bedroom door. I reached slowly for my phone, using its light to scan the room. Nothing looked out of place, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, like a physical weight pressing against my skin. Gathering my courage, I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence. Even the shuffling stopped. Then my bedroom door, which had been halfway open, slowly closed by itself. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My rational mind raced for explanations. A draft, the air conditioning, an uneven floor making the door swing shut. But I knew my apartment. That door had never closed on its own before. I didn't sleep again that night. When morning light finally spilled through my blinds, I examined the door, tested it multiple times. It stayed exactly where I positioned it, never moving on its own. Monday arrived with a bleary-eyed sunrise. I stumbled through my morning routine, downing 3 cups of coffee just to function. The exhaustion was taking its toll. My hands trembled slightly as I buttoned my shirt, and twice I caught myself staring blankly at my reflection, trying to recognize the haggard person looking back at me. The reflection that, for just a moment, I could have sworn smiled when I didn't. At work on Monday, I couldn't focus. My eyes burned from exhaustion, and I jumped every time someone approached my desk. Around 2 p.m., I gave up and told my boss I was feeling sick. He took one look at me and agreed I should go home. But I didn't want to go home. Instead, I went to the public library downtown. Something about being surrounded by people felt safer. I found a quiet corner and started researching. Paranormal experiences, signs of haunting, early symptoms of schizophrenia, carbon monoxide poisoning. Anything that could explain what was happening. Carbon monoxide made sense. It could cause paranoia, hallucinations. I ordered a detector immediately for next-day delivery. That night, I stayed at a Holiday Inn. I told myself it was just until the carbon monoxide detector arrived, but really, I was afraid to be in my apartment. The hotel room felt sterile, impersonal, but safe. I slept deeply for the first time in days. But even in my dreams, I wasn't completely free. I dreamt of endless corridors, of turning corners only to find more hallways stretching into darkness. And always, just at the edge of my vision, a shadow that vanished when I tried to look at it directly. I woke several times gasping for breath, my t-shirt clinging to my sweat-soaked skin. But at least here, in this anonymous room with its generic paintings and starched sheets, I could convince myself it was just a dream. Tuesday. I returned home after work, carbon monoxide detector in hand. I installed it immediately, watching as it calibrated, and showed normal levels. Part of me was relieved, but another part had been hoping for an easy explanation. As I made dinner, just a simple pasta dish, I tried to rationalize everything that had happened. The coffee mug? I probably moved it without remembering. The door closing? A draft, had to be. The feeling of being watched? Classic anxiety symptom. I almost convinced myself, until I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, just a glimpse as I was stirring the pasta sauce, a shadow moving across my living room wall. Not the shifting shadow of a tree branch or passing car headlights. A distinctly human silhouette. I whipped around, spatula raised like a weapon. Nothing. Empty living room. The TV was off. No source for the shadow. My hands trembled as I turned off the stove, my appetite gone. That's when I noticed the bottom drawer of my desk was open a few inches. A drawer I rarely used, where I kept old documents and warranties. Had I opened it recently? I couldn't remember doing so. Cautiously, I approached and pulled it open fully. Everything looked untouched until I noticed a small leather-bound notebook I didn't recognize. It was worn with yellowed pages, sitting atop my folder of apartment paperwork. I'd never seen it before. With shaking hands, I picked it up and opened to the first page. The handwriting was tight, cramped, in faded blue ink. November 3rd, 1973. It's been watching me for 3 days now. I can feel its eyes on me even as I write this. Margaret thinks I'm working too hard, that it's stress. She's wrong. There's something in this building, something that doesn't want us here. My blood ran cold. The entry was dated nearly 50 years ago, but the experience described was eerily similar to my own. I flipped through more pages, each entry growing more frantic, describing shadows seen from peripheral vision, objects moving, the constant sensation of being observed. The writer described losing sleep, becoming paranoid at work, checking and rechecking locks on doors and windows. They wrote about finding their coffee cup moved from its usual place, about hearing shuffling sounds at night, about their bedroom door closing on its own. It was as if this person from the past was experiencing exactly what I was going through now. One entry particularly stood out. November 10th, 1973. I tried to leave. Spent 3 nights at my sister's place in Tacoma. Thought I was free of it. But when I closed my eyes, I could still feel it watching me. Distance doesn't matter to it. And when I returned home today, everything felt worse. Like it was angry I had tried to escape. The shadows are darker now, more defined. I saw a face in my bedroom mirror that wasn't mine, just for a second, but I saw it. No one believes me. Not even Margaret anymore. She's talking about doctors, about medications. But I know what I've seen, what I feel. It's real, and it's getting closer. The final entry, dated November 17th, 1973, simply read, "It's getting closer. It's not content to watch anymore. God help me." The rest of the pages were blank. I dropped the journal like it had burned me. My apartment had been built in the early 2000s. This building wasn't even here in 1973. How could this journal be here? Who put it in my drawer? I grabbed my phone, ready to call. Who? The police? What would I tell them? That I found a creepy old journal I didn't recognize? That I felt like I was being watched? Instead, I snapped photos of several pages, then carefully placed the journal back exactly as I'd found it. I needed to think, to process what was happening. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I paced the apartment, checking window locks, peering behind curtains, opening and closing closet doors. The rational part of my brain insisted there must be a logical explanation. Maybe this was an elaborate prank by one of my coworkers. Maybe the previous tenant had left the journal as some kind of sick joke. Maybe I was having a mental breakdown and the journal didn't exist at all. None of these explanations felt right. That night I pushed my dresser in front of my bedroom door and slept with the lights on, or tried to sleep. Mostly I stared at the ceiling, jumping at every creak and settling sound from the building. Around 2 a.m. my phone dinged with a notification. The doorbell camera had detected motion. My heart nearly stopped. Slowly I opened the app, expecting to see a neighbor passing by in the hallway or maybe a maintenance person. The hallway was empty. Yet the motion detection had triggered. I watched the 10-second clip again, squinting at the screen. Nothing moved in the frame, until the last second, when the camera angle seemed to shift slightly, as if someone had touched it. But no one was there. I zoomed in on the image, scrutinizing every pixel. That's when I noticed it. A distortion in the air, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A vague outline that could almost be a face, looking directly into the camera, looking at me. I threw my phone across the room. It landed on the carpet with a soft thud, screen glowing accusingly in the darkness. After several minutes of paralyzed fear, I forced myself to retrieve it, half expecting to see that distorted face staring back at me from the screen. Instead, I saw 6 missed calls from an unknown number, all within the last 5 minutes. All while my phone had been across the room. I turned it off completely. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I called in sick to work, then spent hours researching the history of the land my apartment building stood on. The Seattle Public Library's online archives revealed that before my building, the site had been home to a small psychiatric facility from the 1960s until it was demolished in 1998. Further digging uncovered newspaper articles about the facility's controversial treatments and unusually high patient death rate. One article from 1974 mentioned a specific incident. A patient named Thomas Mercer, who reportedly claimed he was being watched by something inhuman before he disappeared from his locked room. His body was found weeks later in an air duct, with no explanation of how he got there. The dates aligned too perfectly with the journal entries to be coincidence. The more I read, the more my stomach twisted into knots. The psychiatric facility had specialized in treating patients with reality perception disorders, people who claimed to see things that weren't there, to be followed or watched by entities no one else could perceive. People exactly like the journal's author. People exactly like me. Had they actually been mentally ill? Or had they seen something real, something that had now found me? I needed to get out of my apartment. I packed a bag, planning to stay with my parents in Tacoma for a few days. As I was zipping up my suitcase, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. Silence. Then a soft static, like my white noise machine. "Hello? Who is this?" I repeated. The static grew louder, and within it I could almost make out a whisper, a voice saying something I couldn't quite hear. I hung up, hands shaking. Immediately, my phone chimed with a text message from the same unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. It was a photo of me, taken through my bedroom window, from outside, showing me on the phone seconds earlier, but I lived on the 14th floor. There was no fire escape, no ledge, no way anyone could be outside my window. I ran from my apartment, leaving everything behind except my phone and wallet. In the elevator, I tried to calm my racing heart, to think rationally. Maybe someone had hacked my phone's camera. That had to be it. A high-tech prank or someone trying to scare me out of my apartment. The elevator seemed to take forever, stopping at nearly every floor on the way down. At each stop, I held my breath, terrified of who or what might enter. But it was always just neighbors. The elderly woman from 12 with her yapping Pomeranian, the college kid from 9 with his perpetual headphones, the young couple from 4 who always seemed to be arguing in whispers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the terror gripping me. I spent 3 days at my parents' house, making excuses about apartment renovations. I didn't tell them about the journal, the shadow, the photo. They would think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. My mother fussed over me, commenting on my weight loss, the dark circles under my eyes. "You're working too hard," she said, placing another helping of pot roast on my plate. "That tech industry will burn you out if you let it." I nodded and forced myself to eat, though every bite tasted like ash. My childhood bedroom should have been comforting, with its faded band posters and trophy shelf. But each night I lay awake, staring at the shifting shadows cast by the streetlight outside. More than once, I thought I saw one move independently of its source. More than once, I felt the weight of unseen eyes in the darkness. During those days, I contacted my building manager about the history of my unit. He seemed uncomfortable with my questions, but eventually admitted that the previous tenant had left suddenly, breaking their lease and forfeiting their security deposit. When I pressed for details, he changed the subject. I also reached out to a local paranormal investigation group, feeling ridiculous but desperate for answers. They were eager to help, suggesting they could visit my apartment to conduct an investigation. I scheduled it for the following weekend. After my 3rd night at my parents', I knew I had to return home. I couldn't hide forever, and I needed answers more than safety. The drive back to Seattle was tense, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as I rehearsed what I would do. Check every inch of the apartment, set up additional cameras, sage the place like the paranormal group suggested. Traffic on I-5 crawled through Tacoma, giving me too much time to second-guess my decision. Twice, I nearly took an exit to turn around, to flee back to my parents' house. But something pulled me forward. A need for answers, for resolution, or perhaps something else. A compulsion not entirely my own. When I unlocked my door, everything looked exactly as I'd left it, my half-packed suitcase on the bed, dirty dishes in the sink. But the air felt different, heavier somehow, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Methodically, I searched every room, every closet, under furniture, behind curtains. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet the feeling of wrongness persisted. The journal was still in the drawer where I'd left it. I picked it up again, flipping to those blank pages after the final entry, except they weren't blank anymore. New writing filled the pages, in the same cramped handwriting. It chooses one person at a time, watches, learns, gets closer each day. I thought I escaped when I moved, but it followed. It always follows. If you're reading this, you're next. It's already watching you. More entries followed, describing experiences identical to mine. The shadows, the sensation of being watched, objects moving. The final entry was dated just 3 days ago. I left the apartment, but that was a mistake. Being away only made it angry. Now I can feel it right behind me, its breath on my neck. I'm leaving this journal for the next tenant. Maybe you'll find a way to stop it. I failed. I dropped the journal, backing away. Those entries couldn't have been there before. I'd checked every page. My doorbell camera app chimed. Motion detected. With trembling fingers, I opened the app to see an empty hallway again. But just like before, in the final second, the air seemed to distort. The vague outline of a face, closer to the camera this time. My phone rang, the unknown number again. This time, when I answered, the static was clearer, the whisper more distinct. "I see you," it said. "I always see you." The line went dead. That's when my apartment door slowly began to open. I backed away, grabbing a kitchen knife, preparing to defend myself against an intruder. But as the door swung fully open, the hallway beyond was empty. Empty except for a dark, shadowy mass hovering just outside my threshold. Not quite solid, not quite smoke. A darkness deeper than absence of light. It began to move toward me, into my apartment. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, could only watch as it took shape. Vaguely human, but wrong in ways my mind couldn't process. My back hit the wall. Nowhere left to retreat. The shadow stopped a few feet away, its outline pulsing slightly, like a heartbeat. I felt its attention focused entirely on me, the weight of its gaze pinning me in place. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. It didn't answer, at least not with words, but I felt its response nonetheless, a sensation of hunger, of patient anticipation. It had been watching me, learning me, and now it was ready for something more. In that moment of pure terror, a strange clarity came over me. This thing, whatever it was, fed on fear. The more afraid I became, the more substantial it appeared, the closer it could get. So I closed my eyes, focused on my breathing, and I refused to be afraid. "You're not real," I said firmly. "You only have power if I give it to you." I opened my eyes, half expecting it to have vanished, but it remained, still watching, still waiting, but perhaps less solid. It was hard to tell. I continued breathing deeply, repeating to myself that I was not afraid. The shadow seemed to waver, its edges becoming less defined. Then my phone rang again, the paranormal investigation team confirming our appointment for the weekend. The sound broke my concentration. In that moment of distraction, the shadow surged forward. I felt it pass through me, a cold so intense it burned, a sensation like fingers rifling through my thoughts, my memories, my fears. I screamed then, falling to my knees as it moved past me into my bedroom and vanished. When I could breathe again, I ran. Out of my apartment, down 14 flights of stairs because I couldn't bear to wait for the elevator. I spent that night in my car in a well-lit Walmart parking lot. Sleep came in short, fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares in which I was both pursued and pursuer. In one particularly vivid dream, I stood in front of a mirror, watching as my reflection smiled with too many teeth and whispered, "We're almost ready now." The paranormal team arrived as scheduled that weekend. I warned them about what had happened, but they seemed more excited than concerned. Their equipment detected unusual electromagnetic fields throughout my apartment, particularly in my bedroom and near that bottom desk drawer. Their thermal cameras showed cold spots that moved from room to room during their investigation. Most disturbing was the EVP session, electronic voice phenomena. When they reviewed their audio recordings, a voice could clearly be heard responding to their questions. A voice that said only one thing, over and over. Mine now. Their conclusion: my apartment was indeed haunted, likely by something that had attached to the location since the days of the psychiatric facility. Something that had learned to move between tenants, feeding on their fear, and eventually, something worse. Their advice was simple: move immediately. I broke my lease the next day, staying with friends while I searched for a new place. The building manager didn't even argue when I said I was leaving. He just looked relieved that I wasn't making a scene. I found a small house to rent in Edmonds, a quiet suburb north of Seattle. More expensive, but worth it for the peace of mind. I moved in last week, bringing nothing from my old apartment except my clothes and personal items. Everything else I replaced. My friends helped me move, filling the day with cheerful chatter and takeout pizza. Their presence made the new house feel normal, safe. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. "Fresh start," my friend Jordan said, clinking his beer bottle against mine as we sat on moving boxes that evening. "Leave all that weird apartment energy behind." I smiled and nodded, not telling him that sometimes, in quiet moments, I still felt the prickle of unseen eyes on the back of my neck. For 5 days, everything was normal. The feeling of being watched was gone. I slept through the night. No shadows moved in my peripheral vision. I started to believe it was over, that whatever had been in my apartment had stayed there, waiting for the next tenant. Until last night. I was unpacking the last of my new kitchen supplies when I felt it. That familiar prickle at the back of my neck. The weight of unseen eyes. I turned slowly, scanning the empty room. Nothing visible, but the feeling remained. On my new refrigerator, held by a magnet I didn't recognize, was a yellowed piece of paper, a torn page from a journal I thought I'd left behind. The handwriting was familiar, but the entry was new. "It doesn't stay with places, it follows people. Once it chooses you, distance doesn't matter. I'm sorry." As I read those words, my new doorbell camera chimed. Motion detected. I haven't checked the footage yet. My phone sits on the counter, notification light blinking. I'm afraid of what I'll see if I open that app. More afraid that if I don't, I won't be prepared when it comes through my door. So now I sit here, writing this down while I still can, while I'm still me. Because I need someone to know what happened, to understand what's happening to me. Am I losing my mind? Or is something watching me? I think I know the answer now, and I think it's getting closer. So, there you have it, friends. Another sleepless night, courtesy of your favorite storyteller. If you've ever felt that unmistakable sensation of being watched when you're alone, drop a comment below. I'd love to know if any of you have experienced something similar to our protagonist. And here's a question that's been keeping me up at night. If you discovered an old journal like the one in this story, would you keep reading? Or would you put it back where you found it? Let me know in the comments. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more tales that blur the line between imagination and something else. And don't forget to share with a friend who needs a good scare tonight. Sleep tight, everyone, and maybe check those dark corners of your room before you close your eyes, just to be sure you're really alone. Until next time.